Where are you based?
I'm based in Boston.
Okay. And well, we will have to bring a For the Ladies clinic there, and then you can get your start.
Honestly, if you have one, I would definitely go.
Okay, sure. Perfect. Then that's where we'll start. So thank you for coming on. The way we always start the Ladies of Golf podcast is with a quick 9. So they're just quick, easy questions. To begin, what's your favorite social media channel?
Ooh, Instagram, if I have to give a quick answer, but I just started going on TikTok, and I haven't made my own TikTok, but I've definitely been using some time there, scrolling, but I love it.
I love it. The last book you read?
I read The Magpie Murders. It's an Anthony Horowitz book. I've been totally diving into fiction to kind of check out a little bit. I'm a news junkie for sure. I'm on all the news sites all day long. So before I go to bed, I've been reading some fiction.
Nice. The last podcast you listened to?
Probably The Daily from the New York Times.
Same. Yeah. The last show you binge watched?
I've been watching a lot of 90 Day Fiance at night. While I do, this is work related, but when I do my second edits after basketball or hockey games, when I get home at night, I'll crank through those and have 90 Day Fiance on as my kind of soundtrack.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What is your favorite sport to shoot?
Soccer, for sure.
But your favorite sport to watch, to enjoy?
Probably still soccer, since it's what I grew up playing and I understand it the best. But I also, of course, moved up here during, a big high point in Tom Brady's career in New England. So I became a Patriots fan and really enjoy watching them too.
Nice. I did ask you this before you came on, but have you ever played golf before?
I have not. Would love to start.
Perfect. An event that you would like to cover, but you haven't yet?
I think the Masters, actually, since we're talking about golf, I've covered, I'm sure we'll get to it, I've covered many golf events, but the Masters to me is just such an iconic event in the sport that I'd love to get the chance to see and cover in person.
Amazing. And the proudest moment of your career so far?
I grew up reading Sports Illustrated, or I shouldn't say reading, I just looked at the pictures since I was a kid. And I covered the Women's World Cup in 2015, which was a dream assignment. And when I got back, I had 2 double trucks in Sports Illustrated, which to me was just like a really nice kind of ring of validation and full circle moment that I'm still really proud of.
Amazing. Wow. Were you always interested in photography? We'll start there.
Sure. Yeah, I actually, so I grew up playing soccer, and I always loved sports. I love team environments. I love competitive environments. I was always really active. And I really feel like the stars aligned for me in kind of a cosmic way. There was a guy one of my friend's dads would always take pictures of us. And he was so friendly, like so supportive, so cool. And growing up outside of DC, it turns out he was Doug Mills, who's a New York Times Pulitzer Prize winning photographer. And he would always tell me about covering politics and covering sports. And he's covered every event in the world, the Masters several times, Super Bowls. And I was just, 8 years old thinking like, whoa, could I do that too? And I feel so lucky. He's still to this day was such a supportive mentor and always told me like, absolutely, you can do this. The only thing getting in your way is, putting in that hard work. And if you do that, you can do anything.
Wow.
And as any good millennial would, I took that to heart and ran with it. And so, went to Ohio University to study photojournalism, did a handful of internships, and landed an internship at Getty Sport in New York City and loved it. And just really, maybe a little more dignified than begging, but was on my boss's case for a job as much as I possibly could.
Sure.
And got hired out of school, and here I am. So yeah, always loved it. Long answer, sorry, but yeah, that's how I ended up here.
That's amazing. So yeah, I was going to ask like, what did your path look like before you got to Getty Images? So you can elaborate on it, or like if you want to talk about, just what does it look like to be a staff photographer for Getty?
Yeah, I can do both. I mean, that's definitely a question I get a lot. And I think it's important to answer too, to just kind of show, I think there's a lot of paths to get there. I have friends who work in the industry who didn't study photography at all. I have friends who picked it up later in life. I was lucky that I knew what I wanted to do pretty young. And so when I was in high school, I started interning for, the local weekly paper, that type of thing. And then when I was in college, I had 5 internships, like everything I could possibly, that's all I wanted to do. That was all that was on my mind. And I say that just to kind of emphasize, like, it's really competitive, which isn't to discourage anybody. They can absolutely do it, but you really have to kind of spend a lot of your time doing it.
Yeah.
So my favorite internships were at the Washington Post, at the Seattle Times, which I loved. And then, as I mentioned, at Getty. And that's the one that really, I loved my experiences at the other places, but it really kind of clicked for me. Working at a wire is very fast paced, very deadline driven. But also there's a lot of big opportunities for travel and working in team environments, which is what got me hooked. So in what my life looks like now, I'm based in Boston. I'm going to talk maybe about when it's not a pandemic.
Sure.
It looks a little different right now, but usually I'm on the road about 4 months out of the year, traveling internationally and domestically. So usually I'm in for a few rounds of March Madness. I do work for FIFA, who's one of our main clients, covering the Women's World Cup, the World Cup. I also cover their under 17 and under 20 events, which are some of my favorite, to see some of those up and coming players, men and women. My favorite events are the women's events. It just makes me so happy. And I also love getting the chance to photograph these athletes and give them some publicity, honestly. But then I mostly cover the Bruins, Celtics, Patriots, and the Red Sox here in Boston.
So how did you always know that you wanted to be a sports photographer specifically? And were all of your internships sports based, or were they more, general?
I thought that I wanted to do politics when I was growing up, because that was what my mentor, Doug Mills, mostly covers.
Sure.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I just want to be just like you. That's what I want to do. And I had an internship on Capitol Hill, and I really liked that too. I love politics still, but just kind of, I had these two loves, and it kind of just took me in the sport direction and never looked back. But I really appreciate the hard work of the documentary photographers, the news photographers, and I always try my best to stick my hand up and say, I'll help news or entertainment, whatever you all need. But I've certainly, at Getty, we're pretty divided into news, sport, and entertainment into kind of categories. So it's very little overlap, and I've spent 98% of my time doing sport work.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, looking through your portfolio, you do cover a wide variety of sports.
Yeah.
Well, how do you manage the sports that you aren't as familiar with at first?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that actually comes up for us a fair bit, no matter how experienced you are. Because if you think about it, the Olympics are a great example. So in Pyeongchang, I stayed there for 2 months, and I covered the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. And I'm sure I'll forget some, but I did short track and long track speed skating. I did curling. I did figure skating, alpine skiing, biathlon, all these things that you don't, in the US at least, you don't regularly all of those into short track speed skating. So what I think is the best resource, first of all, is my coworkers, and having the humility, no matter what age or what experience you have, to say, hey, explain to me your mindset and how you go about covering this event. I usually try and ask a few different people to get a few perspectives. And then just doing some good old-fashioned research online. Just start at the Wikipedia page, click through. And then I also will show up super, super, super early and try and watch as much as I can and kind of watch practices. And I think just picking up on people's personalities are important too, and kind of trying to get in those headspaces a little bit. Like, I think for events that are indoors and without a helmet, I'm thinking of curling. There's some characters in curling. I don't know if you remember, the US men's team got some publicity. And I always think as well of those really high pressure sports like figure skating that I wasn't as familiar with. But by the end of the Olympics, I was like deep down the rabbit hole of the, getting certain points at the beginning of your routine versus the end. So yeah, research, getting there early, asking my coworkers is kind of my key to getting my footing there.
And what do you look for when you're on assignment? Like, what's your goal? How do you position yourself?
So I think that there's a few universal truths in my mind. My personal style, or what I look for, is something that's really impactful and clean and readable. So that's, first of all, when I walk into any event, I think, where are the ads? Where are the stands? Are they empty? Are they full? Is there a big neon sign in that corner? And that's kind of a boring thing to do, but we all do that sweep initially. And it's true for golf, absolutely, more than many things too. You know, I'm sure, you know, you go on some courses and it's just green as far as the eye can see. And some you go and you're like, okay, there's a housing development. All right. So 9T is not going to work. There's nothing we can do to clean up 9T. Take it in, move on. We're going to go to 10, you know? Yeah. And I can actually, golf is such a great example for this, where what we look for as photographers is completely different, I think, than what the athletes might be absorbing too, you know? And there's some where it's like, okay, this is an important, you know, this athlete's made the turn. This is an important hole for them. You know, they really need to make this happen here. But for us, at the end of the day, we need it to be clean, no ads in the background, no houses, no volunteer with neon signs, you know? And so I encourage people, when they're looking at golf photos, that was my biggest surprise when I started photographing golf. I just had this very stupid assumption. I was like, oh, it must be so easy. Right. And then I went out there and I thought, no, I'm sure it's like the sport itself. Like, it doesn't look that hard, but really there's so much that goes into it.
Sure. And since we are a podcast about golf, I would love to hear about your experience with the sport. Do you remember your first golf tournament?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I was an intern and I was editing, and I was out in, oh my gosh, I should have looked up the name. There's one in Palm Springs. I was in California. Yeah. I've done a few big ones on the West Coast. I did waste management, of course, in Arizona, which was amazing. I believe
I can't remember the name of the one in Palm Springs. I know it used to be like the Bob Hope, but
yeah, this was like 7 years ago, probably. Yeah. But I remember it was interesting because I was editing and my coworkers encouraged me. They said, hey, why don't you go out and make some pictures when you've got some time in the afternoon? And it was just like I was speaking to. I went out and I thought, how hard could this be? And realized there's a lot I don't understand here. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot more to the composition than I expected. And I filed like one photo because I was feeling so overwhelmed by it. But then it was great because the next tournament, you know, having that time working through it in the past 7 years, now I'm feeling so much more confident, and just knowing what we're looking for, you know, and also understanding what the golfers need and how much space they need from us, when they need things really quiet, when you can be a little louder. It's definitely a little bit of a dance. And you build, I'm using this relationship very loosely. You build a relationship, I think, if you're following these athletes for 9 holes plus, right, you get a sense of what mood they're in, what their comfort level is with how close media can get to them. And a lot of it is just completely nonverbal, of looks, you know, a sign from their caddy, sometimes a golfer snapping at you. I'm lucky that hasn't happened to me yet. I'm pretty conservative. I'm more somebody who backs up a little bit, but certainly some of our photographers who follow the tour pretty exclusively know these golfers and know, okay, sure, you know, this is somebody who I can get pretty close, like pretty far off the ropes, and they're going to be okay with it. So there's definitely was a learning curve, but I've grown to really enjoy it because it's a good challenge.
And does it change from round one to the final round? And
I would say a little bit. I mean, I think that's something that's inevitable, certainly in normal times when there are more crowds at these events. I've been at some events this year where there were crowds, granted smaller. By the end, no matter what the golfer wants, as they're coming through 16, 17, 18 in the final round, yeah, you know, certainly the leader groups, it's going to be loud no matter what. There's going to be a lot of people no matter what. So as a photographer, you can kind of get away with doing a little more movement at the last minute. Okay. Certainly around the green on 18, you know, there's TV, there's fans, there's, you know, guys drinking too many Bud Lights, you know, there's a lot of things at play. Versus maybe in round one, there's less intensity because it's still early, but it is more challenging to move if, you know, it's the first group off 1T on round 2 and there's nobody there. So if you step on a little twig, it sounds like a cannon just went off, you know? And so that's the thing that's been funny without fans is, again, challenging those assumptions. I thought this is going to be so much easier. Right. I don't have to work around these groups, when really, as you know, with courses, if I'm looking at 1 fairway, I might need to also pay attention to 2 fairway and 3 tee right behind me. And you kind of need to be really more aware than I had been in the past. So again, another challenge that we're working through.
Amazing. So I have to ask you about your photo of Jordan. Just to like tee it up, it was with Jordan and Michael Greller at the 2017 Travelers, and they are celebrating after he holed out from the bunker during the playoff. So we in golf, at least working in golf, you see this photo all the time, or at least the video. Do you remember the moment, and can you just like walk us through it? Because the photos are amazing.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. So maybe this is just me. I'm sure there's other photographers who this never crosses their mind. The thing that people might not realize if you're not a photographer is when you're shooting, if you're not using a mirrorless camera, which is some new technology, as you're making a photo, the shutter's coming up, so your eye can't see what you're making, what's in front of you. So if you're really hammering down on the shutter, as we do with some sports moments, like a touchdown or a big celebration, you don't know in that second that you have it. So while he was in the playoff, I'm thinking of all these scenarios, because in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, that might be short. I'm like we were just talking about, I'm going to have to move. Where's the crowd? Where are these other people? With golf, you're always trying to think a few steps ahead. So I'm kind of on one part of my brain thinking, where am I going to move? And part of me is like, okay, but I've got to be really dialed in here. And the second I hear the crowd as it's getting close, because you also can't lose your eye on the athlete. And the second I saw movement, I just hammered on the shutter, and I was like, oh man, I hope I have that. Oh man. And luckily I did. And I was so happy, because what a moment. As somebody who, I cover a fair amount of golf, but I would say, like you mentioned, I do a variety of things. I'm not on the tour every event.
Sure.
I was like, oh, that was really special. I feel really lucky I was here. That's not something that we see every day. So that was the moment.
The photos are amazing, because you got like the whole thing, the moment he realizes, him and Michael, him with the fist pump and celebrating. I mean, the whole thing is awesome.
Well, and I think it's so cool too that, with golf, and there are certain, the major, like there are tournaments that there's going to be a lot of attention and a lot of weight on. But I also love that you never know. That's not the biggest event in Connecticut and Cromwell. And I go with the same intensity as if I'm covering the Olympics, right? I want to do a great job no matter what, but fun that such a moment that people still talk about could happen anywhere, right? And that's what's cool about golf.
Well, I did see that you've shot some LPGA tournaments as well. I would love to hear, just, do you see a difference in the athletes when you're shooting them, or what, just what's the difference, or how has that been?
Yeah, I've done a few. I would love to do more. In general, I find that women's events with golf, with soccer, with tennis, with a lot of the events, I find they're really excited to have media, and so I think it's a really fun experience across the board, and I really enjoy it. But I don't know. I honestly haven't done enough LPGA, sorry,
You're good.
to notice a ton of difference with the athletes. But similar across the board of, trying to read what they're comfortable with, because that's always my first priority, is making sure I'm not interfering with their game.
Yeah. I think the one thing I noticed, just doing like a scroll through Getty, was they tend to give off more emotion, positive emotion, and a lot of smiling, a lot of interaction with people. So it was just interesting to look at those photos and look at some that you did with PGA Tour, and it was a little brighter.
Definitely. And that's the thing too. And again, I can't speak too much to women's golf, just having only done a few events, but I find that there's more kind of interaction with other people too, of a smiling, or hey, good job to you, smile, wave to the crowd. And they're generally really positive events. I love them.
Yeah. So how have you seen your profession evolve, just from out of college to now?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting, because I think when I think of photojournalism evolving, I think, oh man, I came in just 5 seconds ago, and it's come a long way since film and newspapers, and I missed a big change. But really, when I stop and think about it, I started my job 6 years ago, and there have been a lot of changes since then. Certainly a big thing that we are competing with is how much agency all the athletes have and the teams have with controlling their own image through social media. So, for example, Cam Newton, who was the New England Patriots quarterback last season, had his own photographer and own media team. Of course, wow. The Patriots have their own photographers. The PGA has their own photographer. So the special access that newspapers and wires used to kind of be able to leverage to say, hey, we'll do this special story on you. We have this great reach. That's why you should work with us. Now, some of the athletes are saying, well, I don't really need you because I have 50 million Instagram followers and I have my own photographer and I have my own team here. So that's been a big change. And also with newer people who are coming out of school now, a lot of them look at the landscape and say, why would I want to work at a newspaper or a wire when I can go work for, the Texans or, the Miami Marlins when I can go in their clubhouse, and so that's been an interesting kind of change and shift to see, is kind of in sport, at least, moving away from journalism and people going right into, frankly, it's PR work, which is great. But that's a big shift that I'm happy I beat the curve on that just slightly, I think. But also in a really cool development that applies to golf is the advancement of mirrorless cameras. So next time anybody's at an event and you look at the photographers, you might notice you don't hear anything coming from them because they have these silent cameras now. And it's great because we can now photograph in their backswing completely silently behind them, which is amazing. I had an assignment from Golf Magazine at the last event I was at where they said, hey, these are 3 players and we want, from behind and from the side views of their fairway and tee shots. And that's something that I never could have done with a camera 2 years ago, even, because I was able to, and even give them a few different versions of the full swing for their, it was going to be used for like a tutorial of this is how, Brandon Hoffman's, tee shot looks, like a kind of cartoon strip. So that's a really cool development. I'm happy to be able to kind of push the limits a little bit there. It takes the pressure off a little bit of timing everything so perfectly and trying to be so quiet.
Got it. Nice. Well, I typically end the episode asking what advice you have for women who want to pick up golf. So
I would love advice for me. If anybody has some, that'd be great.
It would be to probably just do it, at least give it a shot. And
kind of nervous, but you're pushing me over the edge. You're giving me the encouragement I need.
Well, and then when we come to Boston, you have no option. So
I will be there. No question.
But I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get into sports photography?
Yeah, I would say practice. It's, advice as old as time. But what really hooked me was photographing. My friends were on the swim team all through high school. And I was never on the swim team, but I would just go in the summer and, try and take pictures of them. And I thought it was really cool. And so the biggest thing that I think is pretty common to hear is you don't need to be at the Super Bowl to make a great football photo. You don't need to be at the Masters to make a great golf photo. And often at smaller events, and certainly with people you're comfortable with, you can make amazing work. So that would be my advice to people, is go out, make pictures in your own backyard, in your own neighborhood, and get it out there. And you can always reach out to me. I love looking at photos. If anybody wants feedback, you can absolutely reach out, and I'm happy to do what I can.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Of course.
And I hope to see you at an event. I'll keep my eye out.
Yes, I would love to meet you in person as well.
Yeah,
it's been great to talk to you.
We need to get you out to the U.S. Open and the U.S. Women's Open.
I will plant a seed in my manager's ear today. I'm supposed to have a call with him later, so I'll mention it.
Perfect. Okay, talk to you soon, Maddie. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.